Hello again. Welcome to our final sermon in our series on following Jesus. Someone once sent me a card with a cartoon on it. It said, "I would change the world if only I could get out of bed." Most of us want to make a difference, don't we? We saw it back at the start of lockdown when the government asked for people to volunteer for a national service, supporting people with deliveries of food and medicine and phone and postal contact for the most isolated. The government had hoped to get about 250,000 people on board. Within 4 days, over 750,000 volunteers had signed up, and they actually struggled to find jobs for everyone to do. In our gospel reading today, Jesus is telling his first disciples that they can make a difference. They can change the world. They have lived alongside him. They have got to know God better through spending time with him. Their lives have been changed by him. And he tells them that if they follow his example and live in that way, then they will do amazing things. In fact, with God's help, they will do even greater things than Jesus himself did. They will be able to grow God's kingdom, and in doing so, they will change the world for the better. And the same has been true for Jesus' followers ever since then, including us today. As we follow him and try to live by his example, we can be part of growing God's kingdom, making a world that reflects God's priorities, changing the world for the better. With God's help, miracles can and do happen even today. Over the past few months, we've been looking at what it means to follow Jesus. Back in the summer, we started by looking at the early church and how it developed in those first few years after Jesus' death and resurrection. We've looked at different aspects of what those church communities did to help them grow in faith as they followed Jesus. Just a reminder where we started. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers. Awe came upon everyone because many wonders and signs were being done by the apostles. All who believed were together and had all things in common. They would sell their possessions and goods and distribute the proceeds to all, as any had need. Day by day, as they spent much time together in the temple, they broke bread at home and ate their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having the goodwill of all the people. And day by day, the Lord added to their number those who were being saved. Given the current restrictions around coronavirus, we haven't looked at breaking bread, so sharing communion, or eating together. We can look at those at some point in the future, but we have explored the other things mentioned in that passage and looked at how they each can help us develop our faith in God as we follow Jesus. I don't know about you though, great as all that sounds, it can be hard to live like this, can't it? I want to, but quite often other things seem to get in the way. I want to change the world, but I just can't quite make it out of bed. I want to make a difference, but sometimes God's priorities feel a little bit like too much effort. Conservationist Jane Goodall said, "We could change the world tomorrow if all the millions of people around the world acted the way they believe." She was talking about caring for the environment, but her point transfers well to faith. We want to live it out. We believe following Jesus is a good thing, but somehow it doesn't quite make the difference we had hoped. We get distracted by other stuff. It can be tempting to put God in a church-shaped box after we've done our bit on a Sunday morning and not really let him impact our lives and decisions very much until the next weekend. The transformative, world-changing faith that Jesus was talking about happens when we allow God access to all the areas of our lives. Our home life, our friendships, our work, our purchases, our talents, the bits of life we find difficult, everything. St. Catherine of Siena said, "Be who God meant you to be, and you will set the world on fire." Being truly who God meant us to be means letting God have access to all the areas of our lives. People sometimes think that being a Christian means giving lots of things up, that it's restrictive and a bit boring. In fact, it's totally the opposite. Following Jesus helps us to be free from all the things that can hold us back, and helps us find fulfillment, purpose, and peace. When we live in the way God designed us to live, then we become more and more alive in all the areas of our lives. And it doesn't mean that we all live lives that look the same. God is far more creative than that. But following Jesus means following Jesus' example in whatever we do, taking God's values and priorities into all the areas of our lives. That could be in the classroom, on the rugby pitch, as you do the washing up, as you cuddle the poorly child, as you negotiate deals in the boardroom, as you drop a pint of milk to your elderly neighbour, as you go on a night out, as you choose what to buy people for Christmas. Sorry to mention the C word. Think about your context, your life. What do you do each week? How could you let your faith change the world in those places and situations? What could you do to grow God's kingdom in the interactions you have and in the choices you make? Dream big. What difference could you and God make together? God isn't after followers who are all vicars or spend all their time in the church building. God wants followers who walk with Jesus into every area of life. God wants followers who choose to live their lives by his values. God wants followers who want to work with him to change the world, to grow his kingdom. God wants followers who, as our reading from Colossians reminds us, live life showing compassion, kindness, humility, meekness, patience, and love. We don't always get it right, and that's okay. But God does want us to keep trying, partly to grow God's kingdom, but also because God knows it's the most fulfilling way we can live. My challenge for you this week, and actually for the rest of your life, to be honest, is to be open to God in every area, to ask God to help you be fully who he made you to be, and to ask him to help you dream about how, together, you can change the world. Who has God made you to be? What are you passionate about? What would you really like to change in the world? What could you and God do together to make that happen? Following Jesus is an amazing adventure. Keep walking with him and see where that adventure leads. Goodbye.